evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of TBR. I'm George Binns, and this evening we're going to talk a little bit about the city and get an update of where it's going. And who better to tell us about it than the president of the City Council, Julie Flowers. Welcome, Julie.
Thanks, George. Thanks for having me back. It's always good to be here and chat with you.
Yeah. I almost screwed up and said it was the Board of Aldermen.
That's okay. We would have known what you meant.
Yeah. But not anymore. That got changed a while back. Well, I guess the biggest event recently is the discussion over the library that's gone on back and forth for quite some time. And the appropriation got voted down 5-3 Monday. And to my recollection, this is only the second time that the City Council had voted down a proposal from the administration. And the previous one was when they wanted to use some of the excess funds in the sewer fund to buy a street sweeper. And okay, they bought it anyway, but they used different funds. But that's not very often. So got to be a big issue. A lot of people were concerned about it. I was one of them.
Yeah.
Rather prolific writers on this subject. And I think everybody agrees that got to maintain the facilities. The library needs help. So hopefully it's going to come back sometime in the near future with the details on how we can make this happen.
Yeah. You know, I think you're absolutely right. It's been a really big topic of conversation, which I think is good. Anytime that we have something big happening, big or small, and residents really are involved and engaged, you know, and coming to council meetings or reaching out. I know you mentioned being a prolific writer about it, but it's really important. So I have really appreciated in this library conversation how many people were engaged in it, because at the end of the day, whether or not, you know, we end up doing different projects or not, having people engaged in the process is really what I think should be happening in a robust city government environment. Yeah. So that I think was really positive. I think one of the things that you saw happen with the library, or we all saw happen, and I think the council articulated some of this frustration, and I think rightly so, is that the initial scoping of the project included sort of a more narrow scope of what it would take to do the HVAC portion, and looking at geothermal and an in-kind replacement, and at that point, even a heat pump option. And then the project continued to evolve and unfold. The administration was working on it, learning more, understanding more about what it would take for any HVAC system improve the envelope of the library building, which you mentioned, because you know, it turns out there's some things about the library itself, and particularly with the 1990s edition and how that fits in with the older building, that just don't make any HVAC system very efficient, and has created some of the problems we've seen with the heating and cooling of the library, which is what brought this up. Yeah. But I think what happened that caused a fair amount of frustration, and I think it was rightly placed, is that as that continued to evolve and unfold, the council didn't receive updates as that was going along. So when it came back to us as a fully scoped project, you know, it felt like it had jumped from start to finish and expanded exponentially, which of course the cost had expanded, but there were sort of other pieces of the project that then had been added in. I think if we'd had the chance for that to be unfolded in public conversation along the way, rather than coming as a fully finished presentation at the final price tag. Yeah. I'm not saying that it would have passed. I think it would have felt more transparent for residents. I think councilors would have felt they had been brought along. And so I think you heard us articulating, even those of us who did vote in support of it, articulating the frustration of bring the council in sooner, help us to understand so that also residents can see the process. And let's have these conversations more publicly, even as they're being fleshed out, even as a project is coming together. And I think that was a big piece of what was frustrating both for residents and for councilors.
Well, the problem comes down to you've got to explain to your constituents, what are you doing? Why are you doing it? And if you don't get the information, you're left holding the bag, literally. And yeah, it jumped from 3.75 million, which was a big number, to 18 million, which is wow. And I think that's sticker shock and big time. And that, I think, is one of the lessons learned that I think is that, like you said, we got to discuss this as it's going on. If something new crops up, hey, bring everybody on board. And I keep going back to my old ROTC days that keep the troops informed. If you expect them to function the way you would, they got to know as much as you know. And that just works all the time. And I think a lot of the issues got muddied on this, and that made me personally confused as to what they're doing and why they're doing it. And one of the comments that really surprised me was they started discussing the test boring. Well, that's good. And the answer came back, well, the conditions in the ground are less than ideal, but it's better than someplace else. And for that, you're supposed to spend another $7 million. I mean, I think the administration could have done a better job explaining where it is. And all of these projects, I think we ought to see what's the payback? Where's the break-even point? Is this because you see words that, oh, it's going to be more cost-effective. Well, how much more? Is it worth it, all that, or not? And I don't know. There's a bunch of guys around like me that work in the business world that if I floated a presentation like that, I'd be thinking about a new career kind of thing. So I think it gets down to an issue that we need more transparency in the administration and in the city to understand if we're going to spend big money. And there's a bunch of other big projects coming down the line. The fire station headquarters needs to be done up. The teen center, McPherson Center, is another big project. The city hall, and the other favorite of everything, we need more parking downtown.
Yeah.
So
yeah, yeah, and I think you're right to say that. I think one of the big lessons learned, and again, I think sort of separate from whether or not the vote for the library had passed or not, is about process. And so if we can, and I think, I know you were following it, but people who are following the process, I think, heard the council ask for and then heard the mayor commit to coming more regularly, setting up regular times, which I'll work with the city clerk for us to schedule those, to come with updates on any projects that are unfolding, either ones that are in progress or ones that we expect to be coming up. Because I think you're right that this one, even though, I think in the course of three nights of public hearing, that's still really hard especially for everyone receiving the information, that includes the public, to sort of be able to pull apart all of this different information and pieces of data that are coming, as you mentioned. So even though I think Councillor Feldman did a nice job asking a question that highlighted that in the end, 65% of the project cost sort of travels with any of the HVAC options that we chose because of the envelope improvements to the building, because it triggers ADA compliance upgrades. But that didn't readily jump off the page, and and as you said, it was hard. It was hard jumping in at the sort of deep end of the pool, receiving the $18 million initial price tag, for people, I think, then to be able to pull back and say, what were the steps that got us here, and what choices could we have made differently? So I think a lot was learned about process, and for my part, I can say I think City Council is very committed to really leaning into that kind of process that would bring us those sort of step-by-step presentations that I hope will not only help the council, they'll really help members of the public as well.
Yeah. Well, I think that's the whole issue, that there's a lot going on in the city.
There is a lot.
And this whole exercise of Rantoul Street, of revitalizing the area, we got 5-story buildings out of it. Do we really want to do that? And all of a sudden, people started to think, oh, well, it doesn't really look the way I thought it was going to look. So there have to be changes along the way, and this is part of the difficulty with Cabot Street and the dollar store and that program to put in 143 apartments or something like that. That got to be an issue because, among other things, the city loses parking. So as mundane as it is of where you're going to park your car if you want to go to the movies, it gets to be a big issue, and it doesn't seem to be anybody working on it, and yet all these other projects are going down.
Yeah, and I think you had mentioned a few of the big projects, and you're right on. The McPherson Center, the one positive about the McPherson Center, well, there's many positives. I shouldn't say the one positive, but from a financial point of view, I think something that's unique about the McPherson Center that's also a positive is that one's being funded, the majority of that project will be funded through ARPA money that the city received. And I say that just to say that it's sort of unique among the others because it has a very concrete financing plan that's already in place that sort of doesn't tie in with the others in the same way. But you're right that in addition to the library, we were looking at, or we are looking at, renovation for City Hall, and then that's tied into what happens next with that Family Dollar building, which, as you said, part of the reason the city ended up purchasing that building rather than it continuing down the path that it was slated for, which was development into 145 units, was because the parking lot behind it, of course, we've used as city parking, but we'd always been leasing from the previous building owner. So this does strive to protect that, and I hope will give us some ability to think creatively about that building and what it might become and how we might have, activated retail space. One of the things that I think we're really lacking in our downtown, and you mentioned parking, and it's a challenge. I think thinking seriously about where or how a downtown parking garage could be constructed. I know we have the one over by the MBTA depot, but when I talk with folks, with business owners, or with folks who really look at how vital and thriving downtown hubs kind of work, one of the things that they mention is if you can have some sort of a multi-tier parking structure so that you can take care of some of that stress, not just with street level parking, then you really create a situation where people can come to the movies, they can come, dine out, live, work, and play kind of right in their downtown. But I do think about the fact that we're missing a walkable grocery store downtown. So for folks who are living downtown, there's not a great place to access food. And so, I think about even with the Family Dollar building down the road, once the City Hall project unfolds and we're no longer potentially using it to house city staff, it gives us, I hope, a good opportunity to think creatively as a municipality about how might we use then that resource to encourage or to create space for an accessible grocery store downtown that would also be walkable.
Well, just the other day they had the final drawing of the lottery for the Briscoe.
Yes.
And 85 apartments got filled.
Yes.
And that brings up another issue of that's something that the city needs is housing that is affordable.
Absolutely.
And you start to think about, okay, if the city tries to sell this dollar store property after the renovation of the City Hall, it was going to make money at 145 units. At 50 units, which was one of the numbers that's been kicked around, of housing that is affordable or sub-market housing, it's not going to draw the same kind of money. So I think one of the things that people have to start to recognize is, like selling the Briscoe for $400,000 and selling the property we just bought for $7.3 million for something significantly less, is really an obligation of the city to contribute to a fundamental problem of the lack of affordable housing. And I don't see anybody putting this kind of a message across. And they just, well, we sold Briscoe for $400,000. And instead of taking the $4 million bid. And nobody talks about, well, why'd you do that? It's just done deal. And I think I keep coming back to this idea of transparency. What are we doing? Why are we doing it? And you as a city councilor, more than me, need this kind of information because somebody else besides me is going to ask, what are you doing downtown?
Well, and I like how you conveyed it as that, one of the reasons, part of the decision making that led to selling the former Briscoe School building for less than the highest bid was because of a commitment to creating this affordable housing, in this case for seniors, right? But I liked your phrasing that it really comes out of a commitment and the city's obligation to be thinking about our seniors who need a place to continue to call home. I know you and I have talked before about workforce housing, for our teachers, firefighters, folks who are working in our downtown restaurants and stores. So you're absolutely right to say that sometimes there may be opportunities for us to help create that. The dollar store building will be potentially a good opportunity, but it will mean that we'll have to make other choices, and that would potentially mean not taking the highest bid on something because of a value towards something else. I think what's unique about the dollar store building is that it opens up this opportunity like you're talking about, because if the city, I often say when we're talking about all different kinds of development that are happening, if it's not property that we own and it's whatever is happening is within the zoning that permits it, the city can't tell people what to do unless it's something outside of the allowed zoning. But if we own a piece of property, in this case now the dollar store building, then it gives us the opportunity to really think creatively or to think about goals that we have about addressing the need for housing, about creating space for people who want to live in our community, who may already live and work here, but are increasingly being priced out. And so I think you're right that conveying that as part of our decision making and helping folks understand how we're getting to some of these decisions is a key point. Communication, I think, can always be better. It's something I try to work on. I try to work hard on, even when I'm running a council meeting. I think even how the agenda jumps around can be confusing if you're not looking at it or following it. So I really feel that importance of communicating to people and trying to bring everybody in, as you were saying, keep people feel like they're in and they have all the information. But I will say, communication can always be better. It's always an opportunity point for us, I think.
Basically, you're spending my money. I want to know what you're doing with it.
Sure.
And I think everybody's got
I think that's
attitude.
fair.
And the point you were making earlier about having a walkable market downtown, grocery store. Bell used to be there, but they went out of business. And I can remember way back when they were talking about Rantoul Street, and there was a program to convert the Ford dealership, Thomas Ford, into a grocery store. And somewhere along the line, that disappeared, and it got to be a 5-story, I don't know if it's a condo or apartments, but 5-story residential. And that's a ticklish one. I don't know how to solve, like you mentioned. The city doesn't own the property. You can't tell the developer what you can do with it. But how do you set it up so that things that we need get done, like a walkable market or like having the kind of stores you need to buy stuff. I can remember when you used to be able to buy a hat in town. Can't do that anymore.
Or shoes. Someone said to me once, shoes. It was the same, but same idea as what you're saying. There's things we know we can't walk to.
And nowadays, it's not even that anymore, but you used to be forced to drive out to the mall because they had parking.
Sure.
And now the malls are drying up because you take out your cell phone and dial them up. You don't even dial them, you punch them up. People don't know what a dial is anymore.
I still did. But no, I mean, you're right. That's a challenge. That's sort of the other interesting challenge for vital downtowns and to support our small businesses, because you're right that the ability for us to order things online does change brick and mortar businesses, but we're fortunate to have so many wonderful small businesses right in our downtown, even though, as you and I are saying, there's some, we can see gaps in what we might like to see. But I do think another important question for us sort of as a community is to keep thinking about how we support the small businesses that we have.
Yeah.
Because of course the folks who own them, work at them, they're our neighbors. They live here, but it also is a way of keeping money flowing in our local economy,
Yeah.
which is really important. And we don't want to see those small businesses sort of come and go from our downtown. We want them to survive. And so thinking about how we create a city that allows for that. So parking is a piece of it.
Yeah.
Walkability, I think, is a piece of it
Yeah.
too, because people need to feel that they can easily and safely get around on foot, by bike, to access, go store to store or restaurant to restaurant.
Well, the other ingredient in this viable town is public transportation.
Yeah.
And one of my favorite stories I keep wearing out is one time I had to fly into Love Field in Dallas.
Okay.
Well, it's between Dallas and Fort Worth. And they got terminals scattered all over the place because in Texas everything is scattered.
Oh, it's so much more spread out. Yeah.
And they had a horizontal elevator. That
Okay.
you
Yep.
walk up to the platform, and this thing comes by, and it stops, and you get on board, and you sit down, and it keeps going. And when it gets to your terminal, you get up and get off, and no driver. It's just literally a horizontal elevator, and to some extent, that's something like that Beverly needs. Down Rantoul one way, up Cabot the other way, and make the center of the city a viable. Trying to walk from one end of Beverly to the other, even in the Rantoul to Cabot circle, it's a bit of a challenge, especially if you're lugging a bunch of groceries.
Yeah.
And this kind of thing, and also to extend it to get out to where the train station is in North Beverly, that shopping area. The city needs something like that. And it's just not happening.
Yeah, and this is not exactly the same as what you're describing, which I think is really intriguing. But we did just recently. It's a pilot program, so we'll see how it might unfold or grow. But Salem for a while has had what's called the Salem Skipper, which is essentially a ride share.
Yeah.
The city of Salem runs, but it's very affordable for users. And we just had the opportunity to enter into a pilot where we could join in with them to make a little bit of a more regional skipper. So you'll see that coming. The council just approved that. You'll see that coming to Beverly. It's not exactly what you're talking about, but
Well, it's a start.
but the hope
You
is
gotta start someplace.
it's a way that people could hop from place to place without needing to get in their car, find a place to park.
Yeah.
So I do hope it will be a start for us, but I think you're right. Thinking about how we connect the two streets of our downtown is huge because they are a little further apart than some. You think about parallel downtown main streets. You're right. It's a little bit of a walk between them, and so we need to really think about how we connect them easily for people.
The other thing that came up Monday night was Councilor Sweeney had this program to increase the seniors' exemptions.
Yes.
How's that going?
Yeah, thank you for asking about that. Councilor Sweeney had filed this, and it was referred to our subcommittee on finance and property. And then, as you mentioned, on Monday night before the whole council met, that subcommittee, we met to be able to meet with the chair of the Board of Assessors, Frank Golden, to hear a little bit more about his take on it. And it was really favorable conversation. I think one of the things that all three of us on finance and property, Councilor Sweeney, who filed it, Councilor St. Hilaire, who's the chair, and myself, really sort of held as a shared core hope is that we can utilize, these are state exemptions that we could more fully access, basically, than we are currently doing, to allow for seniors, veterans. There's some different groups that qualify for these, so it won't catch everybody. But I think everything that we can do to try to help our seniors and other other folks who are vulnerable and feeling vulnerable as property tax increases, people who live on fixed incomes, to access tax relief, I think is a core shared value for certainly all three of us who were on finance and property. And so that was voted 3-0 to send back to the full council. And so that will come up at our next regular meeting on the 16th for a vote. And so folks who are interested in that can certainly follow that meeting, but also could reach out to any of us for more information about it.
And the same thing true as the tax work-off programs.
Yes. Yeah, the senior tax work-off.
Yeah, so there are opportunities to contribute to the city, and you don't get technically paid, but you do get a personal benefit out of it, and the city gets a benefit out of it, and hey, everybody comes away from it happy.
Yeah. Folks who take part in that can get $1,000 off their property tax bill, which again, especially for seniors living on a fixed income, I know that can mean a lot. And we did expand. I'm really proud to say we've expanded the opportunities to have more jobs available to seniors. So for folks who like being outside and doing kind of cleanup work, those opportunities still exist. Those were sort of the original ones, but there's many. There's seniors working at the fire station and digitizing files at City Hall or serving as greeters. So if folks are interested, they could reach out to the mayor's chief of staff, Jocelyn Royal-Kursker, because I'm not sure everyone knows about that program, but it's worth looking into.
Well, we've had a half hour of fun, believe it or not.
Time always flies when I'm here with you, George.
Yeah, and obviously, I got a long list of things that we never got into.
We'll have to schedule another one.
Well, we'll do it again.
All right, that sounds great.
Because I think this is part of the game of keeping everybody on the team.
Agreed.
And if you get to the point of your tax bill comes in and what are they doing with my money now? And it makes it pretty onerous to look at that bill and try to pay it, not knowing what it's doing for you.
Sure.
And if it ain't doing anything for you, why is it coming up so big every time? So I think those are valid questions that people would like to know about. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us this evening. And as I mention all the times, you got a comment that you want to make, my email address is at the end of the credits. And if you got a longer comment, I can make room for you here at the table. You're welcome. Thanks again for joining us, and stay tuned. We're going to do this again.